Welcome to Beyond the Pod, presented by SodaStick.com.
Brunette, he moves, Brunette back in, he scores! Minnesota has upset the Colorado Avalanche! Andrew Brunette, the game-winning goal!
Here are your hosts, the second greatest scorer in Gopher hockey history, Pat Mileski, and the second greatest hockey analyst on this podcast, Brandon Mileski.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Pod. As always, it's brought to you by SodaStick.com. I'm Brandon Mileski, Pat Mileski. Golden Gopher, great with me as always. You're up in Fargo. How's it going up there, Patrick?
Good. 2 games yesterday. St. Cloud defeating Minnesota State, and I thought was a really, really good game. Minnesota State dominated for a large part of the game, but they couldn't score. And Jackson Castor was really good for St. Cloud, and they end up with a 4-0 win. And then our Gophers, I don't know if you call it a little scare. They were down 2-1, but then reeled off 8 straight and handled Canisius pretty well. So Saturday should be a fun day with the Gophers and St. Cloud playing for the right to go to Tampa.
All right, before we preview that matchup, let's talk about the actual games yesterday. I did not see the St. Cloud State Mankato game. I did watch Gophers Canisius last night. How about we begin with St. Cloud State and Mavericks? And for the Huskies, this has been kind of the template they've had the last 5 games. They've been very stingy defensively, getting good goaltending, and that's been the formula for them.
Yep, got to find your right formula. And I tell you what, Minnesota State held St. Cloud State in the second period without a shot for like the first 12 minutes of the period. And then St. Cloud gets a power play and they convert. And that's what you have to do, especially if you're not generating a lot. You better have your specialty teams going. And, they did. They get the power play goal and that you get whoever got to 1 first was going to win the game, and it turned out St. Cloud did. But Minnesota State just, man, they had chance after chance after.
All right, we're losing Patrick there. He's probably got some internet issues up at a hotel in Fargo. While we wait for Patrick to return, let me tell you about SodaStick.com. Go to SodaStick.com to get your original Minnesota sports-inspired goods. If you haven't seen this stuff yet, you got to check it out. One of my favorite designs is the North Star hat. All their apparel screen printed here in Minnesota on super soft, super comfy shirts. You'll love it. We're going to hook you up with 15% off your next order. So use the code KFN for 15% off. That is SodaStick.com. Original Minnesota sports-inspired goods. Use the code KFN for 15% off. We should have Mr. Mileski back in the fold. You're in the midst of breaking down St. Cloud State and Mankato.
Yeah. No, I just think Jackson Castor was terrific. And you talked about a formula to win, and St. Cloud couldn't get anything going offensively, but they were so good defensively, and they got the power play goal, and they got to 1 first. And I think that was obviously the difference in the game, because for a majority of the game, Minnesota State kind of controlled things, and they just couldn't get it. Couldn't get to 1, and that really hurt them.
As for the Gophers, the game was a little more nail biting than maybe the score would indicate. If you look at the box score the next day and you see it's a 9-2 score, the Gophers reeled off 6 in the third period. But halfway through that game, Pat, Canisius was up 2-1. They had that highlight reel goal for the second goal, and the Gophers had some looks and some chances, but you were seeing a very confident Canisius team up until that point. And it was almost like the Gophers got those 2 towards the end of the second period to take the lead going into the third. And once Canisius got that 5-minute major and the Gophers just scored a couple on the power play, you could just tell the air had been taken out of the balloon for Canisius.
Yeah, once you get to this time of the year, you make the tournament. You're not there just to show up. And Canisius fought hard, as hard as they could fight. Obviously not a lot of skill, but they played with some grit and they got a couple nice goals. Ultimately, when Minnesota, I thought early they tried to be a little bit too cute and, trying to make plays that were highlight reel type goals. Once they got going and got their D involved and it started their forecheck, you could just tell, obviously Minnesota, was the far superior team. But it took a while, and you know, to the credit of Canisius, they played hard for a period and a half, but just didn't have enough, to match up with the Gophers.
I think the encouraging part for the Gophers is you had a little adversity and you were able to overcome the
Yep.
adversity. But that top line for the Gophers gets a lot of accolades and and deservedly so. You got three guys that are
Yep.
first round or high draft picks in the National Hockey League and are going to maybe be immediate impacts once they get to the NHL. But they got scoring everywhere last night, right?
Yeah,
Dinsky
they
gets the
did.
hat trick. They had some depth guys, Lamb and guys like that, and adding to the offense, and that's kind of good to get everyone involved because when you try to win 4 in a row against really good teams in the national tournament, you can't necessarily just depend on that one line all the time.
And and one guy who I think is so vastly underrated or looked over is Aaron Hughlin. I mean,
Yes.
This kid is phenomenal, and he scored a beautiful goal off a feed from Lamb, excuse me, last night. But his game, and if you remember last year, he really started to heat up at this time too, and he's been phenomenal, great penalty killer, and he's been really, really good. And you mentioned Brodzinski gets 3. Well, all of a sudden, he's got 18 goals on the year. And Matthew Nyes didn't get a point last night. And which you get 9, you think he's going to be involved in them, but he didn't get anything last night. So yeah, getting the depth scoring and guys contributing is huge for him. But the key to Minnesota, Brandon, is their D. And when their D get active, they are a handful to deal with because you got guys, everybody involved in the offense, and they're really hard to stop. But when they're not active, you can get after Minnesota, and they so I think a big key to tomorrow night is getting Minnesota's defensemen involved in the play, involved in the offense, and that's going to open up some avenues for them to score tomorrow night.
Yeah, you mentioned Nyes, and I think his game is going to translate to the next level with his
Yep.
size and his skill. I will say though, last night I thought he tried to overdo some things. Like
100%.
just simplify the game a little bit. The guy, he kind of took himself out of position to get simple shots at times, trying to make the big play.
100%. And they had that problem with him early in the year. And, I remember sitting in Bob Motzko's office when he told one of his assistants, find me a power forward in the NHL and, a good one. And I want you to show 30 clips to Nyes about what this guy does, a game similar to Matthew Nyes and how that guy gives. And I don't know who the player was, but how he gives and goes and doesn't try to one man show it. And all of a sudden, after that, Nye started just playing off of Cooley, playing off of Snuggerud, and he was fabulous. And he reverted back a little bit last night. And I don't care, you every once in a while, are you going to beat 3 guys? Yes. Very rare though, very rare. And I think he's got to get back to his game tomorrow night because he's once he does that, boy, all of a sudden Cooley and Snuggerud have so much more space and time to make the plays that they make. So hopefully that will happen.
I'd like to get your impressions of what you're expecting tomorrow night against St. Cloud State for the Gophers, because I kind of look at this matchup, Pat, as 2 different styles to a certain extent. And the Gophers, as good as they are, and the defensemen they have, sometimes I feel like they can get a little loosey and that style of play doesn't necessarily always translate to playoff hockey, whereas the way St. Cloud is playing right now, that is playoff style hockey. And if the Huskies can kind of continue that, will the Gophers get frustrated and maybe not play the right way, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, here's how I look at things. I think there are 2 teams in the country, maybe 3, that have the talent that Minnesota and Michigan do. Okay, and I'm talking from a skill perspective.
Yeah.
And so I look at St. Cloud State, and they have about 4 or 5 really skilled guys. The rest play a hard game, a smart game, and things that you alluded to. I think St. Cloud has enough to score. Some teams don't. They do. But what they've understood, especially since they lost Dylan Anhorn, who was really, really good for them on the back end, really provided a lot of offense for them. They changed how they play, and they really defend and prevent another team's offense from getting going. And they gave up, I think, to Brett Larson's dislike, too many shots last night. I think Castor had 37 saves. That's a lot of shots to give up. But they did block a lot of shots. So, they want to win tomorrow night, 1-0, 2-0, and they have the ability to do that. So, I think it's going to be real important for Minnesota to stay patient against them, because you can get frustrated and then you keep trying the same thing over and over and it's not going to work. So I think patience is really going to be key to tomorrow night's game.
Do you think the Gophers run and gun style can work against a team like St. Cloud State in a playoff type format when they're playing defensively the way they are, or do the Gophers need to maybe change the way they play a little bit?
I don't think I really don't, because I think you got to play to your strengths. And again, that's why I say if Minnesota's defensemen get active, that's going to help their offense, and that's going to make St. Cloud work harder in their own end. Because if you get Lacombe, playing down, circling down below the goal line, and you have Kester and Chesley and Luke Middlestead. Luke Middlestead scored from literally behind the net last.
All right, Pat, we're having trouble hearing you for a second. Why don't you just dip out for a second, and we'll get right back to you. The Gophers, St. Cloud State will battle it out for a chance to go to the Frozen Four tomorrow. The Minnesota Wild, they were in action last night against Philadelphia, at Philadelphia, and they fell in a shootout. Let's see if we can get Pat Micheletti back on. Can you hear me now, Pat? All right, we're having some audio issues with Pat, so I'm sure Pat will maybe hang up and join us back here in a little bit. But Wild, one regulation loss in their past 18 games now. They lose in a shootout last night to the Philadelphia Flyers.
Sorry.
Now I can hear you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay. We're different locations today. You're up in Fargo at a hotel, and I'm in the office, so the internet's not the same as it always is. But
anyway,
appreciate our listeners staying through with us.
Yeah, and to the point, I think I was mentioning Luke Middlestead scored from literally behind the net last night, and so and Minnesota got going on a Connor Kurth goal last night, and that's when Mike Kester was attacking. And that gets teams out of position defensively sometimes. And so I think your question was, does Minnesota have to change? And I think you don't have to change. You have to stick to your strengths. And when they get on their forecheck and get their D involved, they're awfully tough to handle. And it gets to a point where can St. Cloud sustain that pressure? Because if it keeps coming in waves and waves and waves, it makes it very difficult. So I think it's going to be a wonderful game tomorrow.
All right, let's move on to the Minnesota Wild. I'm assuming you didn't see the game because you
Yes.
were up in Fargo last night, but they lose in a shootout to the Philadelphia Flyers. And Pat, they did not play very well last night, and still fortunate to at least get a point out of it
Mm-hmm.
and continue the streak of one regulation loss. They've had a point in 17 of their last 18 games. Not good last night, but the story continues. Matt Boldy with 2 goals last night. He's been red hot ever since Marcus Johansson was acquired from the trade deadline. And for a team that's without Kirill Kaprizov, but even when they had Kaprizov, needed some secondary scoring, it is nice to see Boldy rolling right now at the most optimal time of the year, going into the playoffs here soon.
Yeah, and it just goes to show how important it is to have a partner out there that you identify with, and that there's a connection there. And look no further than Matt Zuccarello. His game has not been the same since, even a little bit when Kaprizov was there, and they need to get him going. So, hopefully you will have 2 scoring lines every night now when Kaprizov gets back, and I think that it's been really good for this team. And maybe they didn't play well last night. I didn't see the game. You did. But man, it's an 82 game grind. You're just not going to be great every night. But they still got a point, right? And their record is got to be the best in the National Hockey League during that streak, or over the past 2 months. So, they're playing really good hockey and a confident group, and that's what you're going to need heading into the playoffs.
And I will say too that I thought Philadelphia played really well. I mean, you could tell that looked like a John Tortorella coach team last night. Just speed, smothering on the forecheck. I mean, that was as inefficient as the Wild have been getting out of their zone in a long time.
Yeah, and listen, I'm sure Tortorella's made it pretty clear. And Chuck Fletcher gets fired, and there's a interim GM right now, and I don't know which direction they'll go. But for the guys that want to stay in Philly, well, you better play your butts off, or else you're going to be gone. So they're playing hard, and they're tough out, and so that's the way it is.
Let's talk about the Wild's scoring depth, because it has been much better after they had quite the drought there, where it was basically just Kaprizov, Eriksson, Ek, and Boldy for a long stretch of time. But the fourth line's been chipping in lately. Shaw got one the other night. Reeves has scored a couple goals. Sundqvist got another goal last night. He's had 3 since he's been a member of the Wild. Foligno got on the board last night. Ryan Hartman has played well. Obviously, Kaprizov off that line has been hurting them, but Ryan Hartman has been much better over the last month or so. They're getting contributions from everywhere, and maybe that's just the Johansson thing, where now everyone's slotted where they're supposed to be. You have a second scoring line, and that can also take attention away from some of your other lines.
I think you're 100% right there, and I don't know what changed with Hartman, but he's playing so much better, and so much more engaged, and that and so you almost like forget about what happened, have a short memory and get back to the player that you were. And he's starting to do that, which is really, really it's like getting a guy at the trade deadline, right? I mean, a guy who's been non-existent all of a sudden starts. It's like getting a guy, making a trade for him. Who's this guy now? It's the old Ryan Hartman. So that's good. And Dean Evason's going to have some decisions to make once Nyquist gets healthy.
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, and
so let's talk about that, Pat. If you are Dean Evason, let's say, this is a hypothetical, but let's say Kirill Kaprizov is healthy today. Gustav Nyquist is happy today. What are you doing for your lines?
Well, I think it's going to come down to the fourth line and who you want to play there. So all of a sudden, who are the fourth liners? I think Duhaime would be. I think Dewar would be. Reeves, Shaw, maybe. Well, and the question mark is, do you move Freddie Gaudreau down to the fourth line? So you concentrate on who are your top 9. That at least that's what I would do, right? And we know it would be Zuccarello, Hartman and Kaprizov.
Yep.
It would be Boldy, Eck, and Johansson, and then you have a third line. And does that consist of? Do you move Sundqvist to center then, and play him with Nyquist and Foligno? That potentially could happen. And then you have the rest of those guys to figure out what your fourth line is going to be. And we don't know what Nyquist is gonna, we don't know what he's gonna look like being off for so long too.
Yeah.
So but is he a top 9 player? For sure when he's healthy. Well, yeah. I guess we're gonna have to see how healthy he is.
When the move was made, Pat, my thought was when Nyquist is healthy, if he is healthy, and that's a question mark, but if he is, that's the guy you slot with Boldy, right? To try to prop him up. And the Boldy, Johansson, Eriksson Ek line has been so good at this moment, and things can change. We still have, 9-10 games before the regular season ends. So I understand, like 2 weeks from now, you and I could be having a different conversation.
Yep.
But the way it stands right now, the way that line's been looking, I can't see you breaking up that line. So to me, it does almost have to be Nyquist, Foligno, Sundqvist on your third line. And then, I could see Duhaime out of the lineup. Yep. Mason Shaw out of the lineup, but I also wouldn't want to break up Shaw and Dewar. I really like those two together, and they can kill penalties for you. Right. Reeves, I guess, depending on your playoff matchup, maybe there's a series where you don't need him in.
Yeah.
On a game or two basis, and maybe he can go out of the lineup. But I think he's brought some value to this team, and that was a pretty good acquisition earlier on. And it's a good problem to have. And the odds of everyone being healthy at the same time is slim.
Yep.
But Dean could have some tough decisions to make.
Well, would you ever? And this is really tricky because he can play center. The thought of having Boldy, Johansson in the middle, and Nyquist on the other side, and then you move Eck with a Foligno and a whoever on that
Sundqvist
on that third line, bigger, heavier, checking, yet can contribute. I just
but the way Boldy and Johansson are playing in their current position, you can't mess with that. You can't screw that up. And
right.
So and Eriksson Ek is very capable of playing in a top 6 role with those two, right? He's a good fit. So it's not like you're lacking in that area. And obviously Eriksson Ek in the past has brought the best out of Foligno. So in terms of trying to prop Foligno up, I understand that. But as of this moment, when I'm talking to you, Pat, and things can change, I can't touch Boldy and Johansson where they're at. They've been way too good. They've been unbelievable.
Yeah. So you're saying don't throw Johansson in the middle. Don't throw him in the middle. Keep him on the wing. Yep.
Well, I wouldn't want to screw that up.
Yeah, I know.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, I'm with you.
We went the whole year without having a second scoring line, and now we have it. And I don't want to mess with it. So, like I said, it's a good problem to have. And on the back end, Pat, that Klingberg addition to me was a big time addition, and he's not a perfect player. There's a time or two every game where he'll lose the puck for no reason or make a pass that's just off, and you're like, man, that was weird for a guy that talented and skilled. And he didn't play last night. But what that does, they went a long time without Jonas Brodin. Jared Spurgeon didn't play the other night. To have a guy like Klingberg, who he can't replicate those guys' games, but he can play top 4 role. He can play 20 minutes for you, and that keeps your Merrills and your Goligoskis and your Addisons slotted where they need to be slotted. That from a defensive depth standpoint, like they haven't missed a beat when they've had Brodin out, when they had Spurgeon out, and last night they had Klingberg out. To me, it's a huge depth standpoint that they don't have to depend on Addison to play in those roles when you have big guys out.
And like it or not, teams know, Brandon. These teams know players in the league, and there's they know what Klingberg can do. And so automatically there's a pause in the other team's game because he can be that offensive guy to make a play. So you always have to keep your eye out for him because he'll jump in and he'll zing a pass and things like that. And so
he's fun to watch walk the blue line.
Yeah, reputation goes a long way in this league, and he just adds another element to that decor that they've really lacked. And so Matt Dumba's playing better. I mean, he really is. He's playing a lot better, and he wants to win, and so it's been better. It's been better back there.
Well, and let's also talk about Sundqvist, the third, I guess, addition that at the trade deadline that we haven't discussed. I'm not going to act like he's going to wow you on the ice. He's not going to do anything that you're just like, whoa, what a play. But he is the net front presence they were missing when Jordan Greenway should have been that guy. And, just in front of the goalie, getting sticks on pucks, he makes the plays that needs to be made. That was a sneaky, solid addition by Bill Guerin and his crew.
It really was. He's a veteran who's got experience. The backhand saucer pass he made to Foligno in Winnipeg. I didn't think, again, this is not Connor McDavid they acquired. Okay? But he's big and he's a lumbering skater, not a great skater, but he can get to points. But and when you're not a great skater like that, but you can get to the spots that you're supposed to get to and make those smart plays. He's been good and he's won a cup. And so, it was a really sneaky addition to the team.
All right, before we go to Sick Taps, I want to get your outlook on the rest of the potential playoff opponents for the Minnesota Wild in the first round. I would say there's 4, maybe 5 potential opponents. Obviously, Dallas and Colorado in your division. Yep. If you're in the 2-3 against one of those two teams, those two probably the most likely opponent at this point. If the Wild can sneak up into that first spot in the West, you're probably looking at Seattle or Winnipeg. I guess potentially maybe Nashville can sneak up in there, but I would have a hard time believing they would get to the top wild card spot, which is where the Wild would most likely end up. So let's just go Dallas, Colorado, Seattle, Winnipeg. What are your thoughts on those potential playoff opponents? Obviously, for me, Colorado is still the scariest. I get they're not the same personnel they had last year, and they've had some injury issues with some of their star players this year. But, Makar and McKinnon and Rantanen and Landeskog still scare me in a playoff series.
I'm with you. I'd rather if of all those teams, I'd rather face Dallas, to be quite honest. Now, are they? Ottinger is Ottinger when he gets the playoffs, he's really, really good. Seattle is a weird team.
Yeah,
I don't know if Minnesota's played well against them. It would be their first time in the playoffs. So if we're drilling it down, I'd rather face Seattle or Dallas than a Winnipeg.
Or Winnipeg. You'd rather face Dallas than Winnipeg?
Yeah. Winnipeg is is weird because they are defending better than they have due to their new coach Rick Bowness this year. But Hellebuck has been just okay. And so
the Wild, he was pretty bad.
Yeah,
when the Wild played him recently.
He really was.
He was the reason they lost.
And Minnesota's played pretty well against Winnipeg. I just want to avoid Colorado in the first round. I think that would be awfully tough because Colorado's playing really, really well right now. And so anybody
way,
Colorado.
Either way, like you'd have some fun matchups, right? Like if the Wild were to face Winnipeg, you have the border battle. Team, fans can travel relatively easy to both markets. I think that would be great. Dallas, I think we all know the North Stars history.
Yep.
And the division rival Colorado, the Wild have faced them multiple times in the postseason over the years. Obviously, Seattle, there's nothing there, but you got some potential entertaining matchups. It would be kind of deflating as a Wild fan for just wanting to get out of the first round, and then you end up with Colorado in the first round.
But what happens after they get out of the first round? And then, listen.
The rest of the West is beatable.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
It really is. And
it's wide open.
I'm not like Vegas doesn't scare me. They're maybe a little bit heavier team, but Minnesota didn't have what they have now either. And so that changes the game a little bit.
Yeah.
And so if I'd like to see somebody beat Colorado and then then I'd be really, really confident that this team can do it. But here's the thing: this team, Brandon, they could have tanked in terms of just like, well, whatever. It's not our year. This team is hung together, and like it or not, and we can nitpick here and nitpick there, but what they've done in the last 2 months has been really, really impressive, and they're getting good goaltending, and so I'm bullish on the Wild right now.
All right, Patrick, it is the end of the podcast. We always finish every podcast with
You go first.
stick taps. You want me to go first?
Yeah.
I'm going to actually give it to Connor McDavid, who scored his 60th goal the other night. 138 points on the season, Pat.
Yeah.
He is 28 points clear of second in the National Hockey League, and that's his own teammate, Leon Draisaitl, who Leon's a great player.
Yeah.
But let's face it, he's getting his stats are padded because he's playing with Connor McDavid. So, and another impressive season out of Connor, and the guy is, the most talented, most skilled hockey player I've ever seen.
Mine, Brandon, and that yours is very good, by the way. Mine is going to go to Mark Johnson and the Wisconsin Badgers women's hockey team for winning the national championship. Mark Johnson, he loves coaching the women, the girls hockey, and has had multiple opportunities to go and coach elsewhere on the men's side, and he loves doing it, and he's had a great program there for Wisconsin, and they earned their championship this year, and so to Mark and the Wisconsin Badgers women's hockey team, congratulations.
I agree with that one as well, Patrick. As always, appreciate your time. We'll talk to you next week.
Sounds great. Thanks, Brandon.
All right, he's Pat Micheletti. I'm Brandon Mileski. This has been another episode of Beyond the Pod. As always, you can listen to Beyond the Pod on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch it on the KFN YouTube channel. We'll talk to you next week right here on Beyond the Pod. Bye.